particularly because the imprisonment of Julian Assange, an award-winning foremost publisher, is a direct threat. It's really an assault on our freedom of speech and freedom of the press. These are both parts of the First Amendment. And why is it the First Amendment? It's the First Amendment because our founders knew that freedom of speech and freedom of the press are absolutely essential to the functioning of a democracy. Without a free press, we do not have an educated electorate, an informed electorate, or an empowered electorate. And what the graduates in today's class are facing are really a series of existential threats that we are all facing, whether it is the collapse of the climate, crushing economic and racial inequality, endless war, escalating nuclear threats. These are all very serious crises that we are all facing, but particularly the rising generation is facing these crises. And if we are to stand a chance of finding our way forward through these crises, we need to have dialogue, we need to have information, and we need to have an informed and empowered electorate. So the most important thing that Merrick Garland could do for the graduates at today's Harvard commencement is to end the extradition of Julian Assange and to drop the legal case against him. Barack Obama knew better than to prosecute this case, which has been in the works for a long time. And the reason that Barack Obama said that he did not go forward with this case was because prosecuting Julian Assange under the Espionage Act would establish grounds for prosecuting everyone else. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, most other major journals also published the findings that Julian Assange made public. That is not just okay for a publisher to do. It's absolutely essential for our democracy. That is the job of a publisher, to publish information which is critical to the public interest and critical for holding our government accountable for what it does in our name. What WikiLeaks, the organization founded by Julian Assange, does is make that critical information accessible, make the actions of our government transparent and accessible to we the people in whose names these actions are taken. So, for example, one of the most renowned releases of WikiLeaks was a video known as Collateral Murder. That was a video showing a group of journalists, videographers, and ordinary citizens being mowed down remotely by a helicopter that mistook a tripod that the videographer was carrying over his shoulder. He had a tripod, and the guys up in the helicopter, I believe it was an Army helicopter, thought that that tripod, from 10,000 feet or whatever, it looks like a rifle. Do we have permission to mow them? essentially imprisoned at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he sought refuge from London authorities. He was there for 7 years, and then he was essentially arrested. They broke the safeguards supposedly provided by the Ecuadorian embassy and dragged him out and hauled him into what's called the Guantanamo of London, of the UK, in fact, a horrible, inhumane, and dangerous prison where Julian Assange has been kept for 3 years. So the point I want to make here, I think the point that all of us want to make to Merrick Garland, is that we need freedom of the press, we need freedom of speech, we need an informed electorate if we are to inform people about wars, about violations of human rights, about war crimes, and so on. For us to be able to deal with the crises we're facing, we need free speech and a free press, and that means we have to release the foremost journalist who's basically been persecuted by the United States, by the UK, and by several other collaborating democracies for many years. We need for him to be released because otherwise he is a symbol to other press that reporting on national security in a way that is entirely routine, that is extremely dangerous to them, and that they risk being locked up in prison for 175 years, which is what Julian Assange is threatened with. Barack Obama decided not to proceed with this case, with the extradition and prosecution of Julian Assange, because he knew that doing so would essentially establish a threat to journalism and national security reporting, not just to all journalists and publishers in the United States, but all around the world. Because another aspect of this case is that a reporter from another country who's not even from the United States is being extradited and held accountable to U.S. law. What does that mean? Well, that means if China or Pakistan or India or Russia or Saudi Arabia didn't like what some reporter was saying in London or in the US or somewhere else, they could just abduct that person or extradite that person and drag them over to their country and prosecute them and lock them up under their own laws, which may be even more repressive than our laws that Julian Assange is being prosecuted under. So this is really critical. It is a dire threat to press freedom. And one other message to Merrick Garland is that the case of Julian Assange is not only an assault on freedom of the press, it's also an assault on the integrity of our justice system. Because the case that has been prosecuted against him has had so many violations, it should have been thrown out of court long ago. Those violations are incredible. They include that his communications with his lawyers have been blocked, that he has been surveilled systematically at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, that he's been essentially ensnared for extradition, and that he has been targeted for kidnapping and assassination by the CIA when he was at the embassy in London. So there have been, you may remember if you were following the Pentagon Papers, if you were back around, when was that, in the 1970s, I believe, the early 70s? The Pentagon Papers, which were so critical for bringing the Vietnam War to an end, for informing the public that that was actually a hopeless case and a very abusive case. When the truth was revealed through the Pentagon Papers, the public mobilized and helped bring an end to that war. Well, the Pentagon Papers were published by the New York Times, the Washington Post, by all of the respected periodicals, journals at that time. And that's very similar to what's going on now. And Barack Obama basically said, we can't do that. We cannot prosecute journalists who make this critical information known to the public. Nels Melzer, the United Nations rapporteur, found that there were 50 violations of due process and violations of basic law that were had already taken place in his case, in Assange's case, and referencing back to the Pentagon Papers, that case was thrown out of court. That case was thrown out of court because they violated the privacy rights of the journalist Daniel Ellsberg, the person who leaked that information. He leaked that information, and the prosecution had spied on his psychiatrist. Okay, spying on his psychiatrist was the offense that had that case thrown out of court. Compare that to the violations that are going on right now, where his very life, Julian Assange's very life, was being plotted against with assassination and kidnapping by the CIA. So you can see that this case should long ago have been thrown out. And I want to add one more point, which is that the prosecution of Julian Assange relied on a star witness. Anybody remember hearing about the star witness in that case? The star witness is a admitted and convicted sociopath. Sociopath means liar. So they are relying for their case on a convicted and diagnosed liar who was also convicted of forgery, fraud, financial crimes, and child sexual abuse. That is who the case against Julian Assange has rested on. It makes a complete mockery of our system of justice that this case has not already been thrown out. And that is essentially our message to Merrick Garland. People are skeptical enough of our institutions of government. If you look at polls today, faith in government is running somewhere around 25%. And if you look at people under the age of 25, faith is running at about 20% or 21%. And now you add to that this complete mockery of justice that's taking place right now in the prosecution of Julian Assange. And you really wipe out confidence and faith in our public institutions and in your department, Merrick Garland. You are making a mockery of your own Department of Justice by allowing this case to proceed. So we urge you right now to please make a gift to the graduates of Harvard and to the graduates of all educational institutions today, whether they are colleges or universities or high schools or grammar schools. You need to make the biggest gift to the future of our younger generation possible by ending this assault on our most basic freedom that establishes the infrastructure for our democracy. End the prosecution of Julian Assange and end his extradition. You can do that, Merrick Garland, today. We urge everyone to help deliver that message to him if you can. Thank you so much. Let me see who's next. Paula.
Thank you. I'm Ed Childs. I represent the Harvard Dining Hall Workers, the union, United Trail Local 26.
Yeah.
And we want to say that we demand, we're not asking, we demand the Attorney General of the United States stop the charge of Julian Assange. Who is Julian Assange? He He's not just a reporter, an Australian reporter at that. He is the hope of every worker, not only in this country, but all over the world, who have the right to squeal, to tell, however you want to put it, to be a whistleblower on illegal activities that their government, their employer, does. Everybody in the world has a right to be a whistleblower. And every worker understands that. But yet, the biggest whistleblower in the world, Julian Assange, is now trying to be extradited into the United States to be shut up. Shut up because he has started WikiLeaks. Whistleblowers in this country have been suppressed for centuries. Proof positive. Harvard University, just today, just this week, just this month, has admitted that they were complicit in slavery. Everybody in the world knew about it. But what they did is suppress whistleblowers. So the secretaries, the librarians, the students, the professors weren't allowed to whistleblow on Harvard over the last 100, 200, 300 years about their complicity with slavery. That's why we need Julian Assange. That's why we need WikiLeaks. It's an outlet for workers to have a be a whistleblower. That's why we demand the Attorney General release all charges and apologize to Julian Assange. Every secretary, every worker has a right to whistleblow. We now have the right not to smoke cigarettes because we know what's going on with cigarettes. Because they illegally put stuff in there to addict us, addict our children. But not until the whistleblower testified that the media printed. Now it's suppressed for decades and decades while the health of this country went down. We need whistleblowers. We have the right to be whistleblowers. Now let's get to the military. We say we support soldiers. You don't support soldiers. Suppose soldiers in this country are one of the most suppressed people in the world. We're not allowed to be whistleblowers. Even after World War II, they said all soldiers have a right to whistleblow on illegal activity. But yet, we see U.S. soldiers who have leaked, who have whistleblown, and Julian Assange has picked up their terrific, courageous testimony and published it. They've been put in jail, or they're threatened with jail. Why? Because they want to suppress our military, our soldiers. That's why we demand the Attorney General release Julian Assange. Not just for Julian Assange, but for every secretary in this country, every soldier in this country. That's why we demand the Attorney General release Julian Assange. Unite here. We represent the hotels. We represent the dining hall workers here at Harvard, Brandeis, and other universities. We need whistleblowers to tell how our employers are illegally suppressing our union, illegally taking away our health care. Harvard University illegally tried to take away our health care. We needed the secretaries who secretly told us what they were going to do. We had professors have to secretly tell us that it was illegal what they were doing. Why did they have to secretly tell us when this was illegal activity by Harvard University? Because whistleblowers are suppressed in in this country. That's what Julian Assange represents. Every whistleblower in this country and in the world. When they can arrest an Australian publisher of whistleblowers in this country, in another country, that's not an attack on that journalist. That's an attack on everybody here in this country. Every soldier, every police officer who wants to whistleblow about the illegal activities in the police department. That's why Black Lives Matter. That's what it's about. Don't say that there's bad apples, because the good apples aren't allowed to whistleblow, because the Attorney General won't release Julian Assange. That's what's going on here. Our employers, Starbucks, Amazon, have been doing illegal activities to suppress the union movement of the courageous young people creating unions at Amazon and Starbucks. We need those secretaries to whistleblow of their illegal activities. We have a movement in this country to suppress the rights of workers. We need whistleblowers to tell us what's going on. The complicity with politics, the complicity with the police, the complicity with the government, the complicity with employers. But to do that, we need whistleblowers. The Attorney General of the United States, if they're doing their job the way we think they're supposed to do, that we're told they're supposed to do, are looking for whistleblowers. Aren't you supposed to squeal when you hear something? Well, that's what a whistleblower is. But the Attorney General says, oh, wait a minute, you squealed that we were doing illegal activity in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We were doing illegal activity in New York City, in Boston, and all through the South. You're under arrest for squealing. That's not what workers in this country want. We need whistleblowers. That's why we demand the Attorney General release Julian Assange and make whistleblowers heroes, not villains. That's what's going on here. I have the gall that Harvard University invited the Attorney General. What it is, Harvard University is telling the Attorney General, yes, arrest those whistleblowers. Yes, arrest those secretaries who squealed to the graduate student union that the university was complicit in sexual harassment of the grad students. That's why the grad students went on strike, not once but twice, to demand sexual harassment stop. And they were secretly told by secretaries that Harvard University administration was trying to suppress that campaign because they wanted sexual harassment on campus the same way it was going on for 350 years. That's what sexual harassment is. That's what the Supreme Court is doing today about women's rights. It comes from Harvard University. That's why we need whistleblowers. And we need Julian Assange free. We demand the Attorney General release Julian Assange and make whistleblowers heroes, not felons. Thank you.
want to talk a little about the history that's involved here and why it's important that we're out here today. Because I know Harvard cares about its history. It's one of the most important things to it is the legacy of Harvard, right? And its proud history. You know, not exactly. Now they say something about history. I believe it was Mark Twain who said that history does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And Jill mentioned a name earlier, and there's a lot of elders here. You might remember a name. Daniel Ellsberg. Dan Ellsberg is the man who released the Pentagon Papers and told an entire country, an entire world, that they had been lied to for decades about the war in Vietnam. And it made change. I'm sure we have a lot of elders here who are watching their kids and their grandkids graduate. And you may remember that your brothers or your cousins or maybe your uncles, maybe your fathers were sent to Vietnam under false pretenses because of lies that multiple administrations, Democratic and Republican, had told the American people. And we would not have known that those were lies unless Daniel Ellsberg risked his life and came forward with the truth. Because they wanted to lock him up and throw away the key too, just like Julian Assange. So I'll tell you right now, you can't in your heart remember Daniel Ellsberg, remember the Pentagon Papers, remember the lies of Vietnam, and say you stand with that whistleblower and those journalists, and not stand with Julian Assange, and not stand with Chelsea Manning. Right? It matters what you do now. The brave people, and I'll tell you, the things that they said about Daniel Ellsberg back in 1971 are the same things that they're saying about Julian Assange now. Right? They call him a traitor. They call him a troublemaker. Call him unpatriotic. It's much harder to stand up for those rights and values when they're happening. It's happening now. There's a lot of kids in there that want to be journalists. They want to be writers. They want to be truth tellers. They're under attack. They're under attack right now. That's why they're going after Julian Assange. They're sending a message to every young journalist-to-be that's graduating right as we speak. They're letting them know, don't mess with the U.S. government, the U.S. military. You want to end up in jail for the rest of your life? It's called the chilling effect. And that is what's going on right here. Someone mentioned it earlier, President Barack Obama. You know, he wasn't a fan of Julian Assange, but he said we can't prosecute him because it's going to set a terrible precedent. And it's going to be an attack on the freedom of the press, on the First Amendment itself. And then if we prosecute Julian Assange, then someday, and someday soon, they're going to be prosecuting the New York Times. They're going to be prosecuting the Washington Post. They're going to be prosecuting the Boston Globe. And so we didn't prosecute. I'll tell you right now, if this injustice goes on, don't think about who's in power now. Think about who might be in power soon. And think about what they'll do with the power that this precedent sets. Right? You may not be afraid of Joe Biden. But think of who could be president and what they might do with this power to go after journalists, to shut up their critics, to make fascism real in America. Because that's what happens in a fascist state. You speak out against the government, you go to jail, you go directly to jail. That is what's at stake. That's why we're here. Merrick Garland, who's inside, I hope he can hear me, is the top law enforcement official in the United States of America. There's an attack on the First Amendment. It's going on right now. What are you going to do about it? We are here to make a demand, and we need you, all of you. You look great, you're in your fine clothes. We need you to join us and make a demand as well. If the future of this country is at stake, the future of the First Amendment is at stake. What kind of country do you want your kids to live in? What kind of country do you want their kids to live in? Because if it's not a country where the press is free, where the truth is protected, then it's not a country worth living in. But we can make a difference. We can make a change. But change is not possible unless we make a demand. We know that to be true. Now there's a man, maybe 100 yards from where I am right now, who can make a difference. Attorney General Merrick Garland. We need to make a demand right now. Merrick Garland, drop these charges against Julian Assange. Julian Assange is the Daniel Ellsberg of our time. Collateral murder is the Pentagon Papers of our time. If you lionize those figures from the past, then you need to act accordingly in the present. That is what matters. The now is what matters. If you believe in the truth, if you believe in journalism, then you must support dropping these charges against Julian Assange. This man has been tortured for years, and it's not just an attack on Julian Assange, it is an attack on every journalism student that is graduating right now. If we let this pass, you're not going to recognize this country next generation and the generation after that. Without the freedom of the press, America is not America. Merrick Garland, we're demanding that you do the right thing. And everybody that can hear the sound of my voice, I need you to make that demand too. There is an assault on the very fabric of what makes this country this country. We have to make a change. Thank you for letting me be here. I'm privileged to stand with these students who organized this. Harvard students who are against the injustice, the travesty that is being done to a journalist. We need you all to speak up. Nothing changes unless you speak up. Julian Assange lived that value, and right now he's suffering for it. He's suffering for every journalist, every future journalist that's graduating right now. He's sitting in jail for them. He's being tortured for them. And it's time we did something about it. Merrick Garland, drop the charges.
Yes.
Sorry, what's your name? Brian. Your last name? Garland. Can you spell that out for me real quick? G-A-R-D-E-Y. Brian? Brian. Cool.
First, I want to congratulate the graduating class of Harvard 2022. You're entering a very tricky time. And as has been mentioned, if you are a journalism major, you're looking to go into public relations, if you're looking to become, God forbid, a foreign correspondent, you're going to be challenged by many forces which will compel you to suppress the truth, to look the other way. to live to that next paycheck. And more than ever, you're going to feel the forces of empire. You're going to understand the cost of not doing so, of not complying, of not falling silent, and yourself being a participant in chilling access to truth. I encourage you, if you are thinking of this career, think about how much you're going to have to call upon your values, call upon your courage, and speak out. Break rank. Because if you don't, the very things that we are struggling for as a just and open society will continue to fail, will continue to be broken. And people like Julian Assange, who stands as an iconic example, truly the vanguard of free speech, is sitting in prison, has been sitting there, I believe, 3 years in Belmarsh, what is known as the Guantanamo of the UK correctional system, waiting extradition to face charges of 175 years for espionage. He is not even a citizen of the United States. He is a citizen of Australia. It has been said before, if you can extradite and imprison a citizen of another country and bring him here and essentially give him a death sentence, what does that portend for our world? Not just the United States, but for the world at large. If we think it's a mess now, think about how it will be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, when these very individuals who are graduating today will have to contend with so much of the damage that we're seeing happen every single day. When they punish people like Julian Assange, when they punished Chelsea Manning, when they punished Daniel Hale, and there's a whole list of them, what does that tell us? You can't speak truth to power. How dare you? And if you do, you're going to pay a very, very high price. It may be your career. In the case of Julian Assange, it could be his life. In the case of the Reuters journalist with the camera iPod on their shoulders, standing on a street corner in the suburban area of Iraq, they were mowed down by an Army helicopter. I believe it was 50 caliber bullets. What were they? They were journalists. What's the message there? How about the journalists, regardless of how you feel about Israel and Palestine, how do you feel about free speech? How do you feel about a free press? What about the journalist that was killed recently in Israel, in Palestine? Okay? It is open season right now on our free press, on our media, our free speech. Straight up open season. So I'm going to end this by saying, I don't care what your political persuasion is, okay? Don't care if you're Republican, if you're Democrat, if you're undecided, if you're confused, if you're an atheist, if you're a Christian evangelical. I really don't care. If you pretend you care about free speech in this country, this is a non-denominational issue. Wake up. What I do want to say in closing is all of us together can actually bring about change. All of us staying cognizant of what's happening can put up a firewall against the continued deterioration of our freedoms. If you think things are bad now, we're going to look back on today nostalgically. We're going to think times were good, even though they're gunning down and imprisoning journalists right now. We're going to look back on that and say those were the good days. And with that, I wish the best for those graduates at Harvard and every success. Join the fight. Thank you. Next. Many people have spoken about the details of the case against Julian Assange, about all the irregularities, false lies, and about the consequences for us if free speech is even further curtailed. Free speech is always vulnerable. It's not as if the history of free speech in this country is one of unassailable, an unassailable property that was always protected. But one thing that makes the case difficult and perhaps makes the enormous amount of information about what's wrong with the case, about how irregular it is the fact that how do you frame what's happening both in the press and the statements from governments, not just the United States government, about the case. And one way to understand it is to look upon governments not simply as representatives of law, order, or control, of which they do a lot, but as advertising firms and public relations firms. And so the information we get about Julian Assange, but about many other things, war among them, or the state of our prisons, or the decisions of our courts, is to understand that a major part of the information isn't really information, it's advertising, and it's public relations. And that puts on us, the public, a profound responsibility that can also be a very boring one, unfortunately, which is that you're put in the position, if you want to have an opinion about something, of doing a lot of research about what really lies behind the claims. It seems that it ought to be obvious, but it hasn't been for many people, that if somebody publishes what is physics, the information files about files downloaded from computers, unassailable evidence of crimes that have been committed in wars the United States has been conducting, an extreme difference between the public statements of government officials and what actually has been going on at the same time. We don't torture, is the public statement, and the reality in the emails that were released and published by Assange was that, yes, indeed, not only do we torture, but we negotiate with different countries to set up sites for torture. But you're then forced to try to understand what might lie behind the claims that are made, and to understand that if somebody is responsible for exposing the truth behind the lies that public officials have given, or the reality behind the claims that the war in Iraq, or for that matter in Afghanistan, is almost a peaceful war, then it follows, I'd say it follows as day follows night, it follows that what you hear from the government, and now what you hear from the mainstream press, are the words of an advertising firm, of a public relations firm, and you will have to go to other sources to find out what's really going on, and why you haven't heard in the mainstream press or on the television news that Julian Assange is an important and valuable contributor both to our information and the freedom of the press. Free Julian Assange. I'd want to close here by saying, once again, to Merrick Garland, the best gift that you can give to the graduating class of 2022 and 2021, the graduating class at Harvard, the graduating class at every college and university across the country, really across the entire world, and the graduating class of every high school and grammar school across the world. The best gift you can give to the rising generation is a democracy with a free press. Without a free press, we do not have a democracy. These young people do not stand a chance to deal with the challenging crises that we face across the board, from the collapsing climate to the crushing inequalities of our economy and of racial and social justice and labor justice, the crisis of expanding war, the increasing nuclear threats that we are facing in the proxy war in Ukraine, this tragic war, but it's one of many wars. One of many wars where the United States and Martin Luther King's word has been the greatest purveyor of violence the world over. We need to be able to talk about that. We, the American people, need to be informed and empowered with many different points of view. And what we're seeing now is a real tragic exercise of censorship in the form of the recent Disinformation Management Bureau. Does that ring a bell to anybody? This Orwellian agency that was recently established, they just put it on pause because they were rightly embarrassed about this Orwellian Ministry of Truth to basically shut down vehicles for informing and empowering the public. There's a private organization called NewsGuard, which is in the business of harassing anti-war news organizations and putting a label on them. They are acting as if they are thought police. We've seen many anti-war journalists deplatformed. A critical video was recently taken down from YouTube showing the conversation of Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State, with the then ambassador to Ukraine, arranging who would take power when the coup was exercised in the upcoming weeks in the Maidan in Ukraine. That mysteriously was taken down a couple of weeks ago, and because of the outcry against it, it reappeared yesterday, as I understand. But this is what we need to defend our democracy against. The First Amendment is the First Amendment for very good reason, because we need freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom to protest for redress of grievances in order to have a fighting chance for a democracy. And we need a democracy to solve the crises that stand before us and that are so daunting, especially to the young people graduating today. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank especially the students here at Harvard who made this demonstration possible. I want to thank all the people inside who are holding signs, because we need to get a message to Merrick Garland. The persecution of Julian Assange is an assault on freedom of speech, and it makes a mockery of our system of justice because of all of the violations of law and due process that have taken place in this case. The case is an absolute blasphemy against justice, and it is a humiliation and an embarrassment to every citizen of our country that this case exists. And it is absolutely that embarrassment and humiliation to Merrick Garland to allow this case to go forward. Barack Obama knew that to allow the persecution of Julian Assange is to essentially throw open the door to the same persecution of every journalist and publisher who reports about national security and critical information that's essential to the public interest and to holding government accountable for what it is doing in our name. Julian Assange has exposed war crimes, torture, lies committed by not only the United States, and he has also published huge revelations about just about every other major country, including Russia. This is not just against the United States. This is about making government transparent and accountable all around the world. That is why Julian Assange is being persecuted, because what he exposed is so important and so significant. In the same way that the Pentagon Papers, as Brian pointed out, the Pentagon Papers raised the curtain on the catastrophe and the inhumanity and war crimes that the Vietnam War constituted, and it enabled us as citizens to rise up and stop that war. In the same way, the Washington Post published about a year ago the Afghanistan Papers, which everyone was so shocked at, to learn that Afghanistan was essentially a hopeless cause. It was known to be a hopeless cause, yet we spent trillions of dollars on that hopeless cause. Cost untold numbers of lives, both of U.S. and allied soldiers, but especially of the people of Afghanistan. And when the Afghan papers were published, the truth was known. And now the thinking has, what should we say, it was a little bit late in the game, but it certainly helped move things along and needs to inform where we are now. We need the likes of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks to keep us informed and empowered, and to ensure that we have a democracy that is serving us, that is not hijacked the way it has been by the weapons industry, by big business, by billionaires, by big tech, by the fossil fuel industry, by health insurance and pharmaceutical industries. We all know that they are pulling the strings of government. We need whistleblowers, as was pointed out by a previous speaker, and we need publishers who are willing to tell the unvarnished truth. That is what democracy depends on. That is what the First Amendment is all about. That is why we have freedom of the press up there as the #1 civil liberty, so that we, the public, can be informed, can be empowered to exercise our democracy and create an America and a world that works for us all. So we need to get that message to Merrick Garland. If you can hear us, Merrick Garland, we're going to give it to you one more time. Let's all say it together. Free Julian Assange again. Free Julian Assange again. Free Julian Assange. It's in your hands, Merrick Garland, and the blood is on your hands, not just for what happens to Julian Assange, but for what happens to our democracy. If we do not lift this scourge, this assault, this attack on freedom of the press, free speech, and our right as the public to be informed and empowered to uphold our democracy. So if you can, please call the White House, call Merrick Garland's office, sign up on our list here today. You can see Susan, who's wearing the black suit. She will take down your email address so you can be a part of this group, and ensure that you have the phone numbers and the emails to use to get our voices into Merrick Garland's head. He needs to do the right thing. He needs to do what Barack Obama understood was the right thing. Right now, he is upholding one of the worst decisions of Donald Trump to prosecute this case. He is essentially carrying out the very repressive policies of Donald Trump, which were so ill-informed and so ill-advised. And Merrick Garland needs to reverse that. He's a good Democrat, if there is such a thing. He considers himself a good Democrat. So he needs to uphold the principles of the Democratic Party and stop upholding Donald Trump's version of free speech, which is not free speech at all. So at least be true to the best of your own party. Merrick Garland, we ask you, in the name of democracy, in the name of these graduates here today and their future, stand up, stand with the American people, stand with the best traditions of freedom of press, release this political prisoner, and free Julian Assange and stop his extradition. Thank you all so much. Now, what do we want? Free Julian Assange. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Free Julian Assange. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Free Julian Assange. When do we want it? Later. What do we want? Free Julian Assange. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Free Julian Assange. When do we want it? Now. Who can do it? Merrick Garland. Who can do it? Merrick Garland. Who can do it? Merrick Garland. When is he going to do it? Now. Do it now, Merrick Garland. Do it now. Woo! Thank you.
Poor Michael.
I'd like to get a group picture. Can we get a